Welcome back to Cindy's Library. This is Cindy, and today I'm going to talk about what I read for the second half of November. So let's get to it. So I read That Hideous Strength, the third book in C.S. Lewis's space trilogy, as it is commonly called. Yeah, I was on a roll and decided I had to do this one. This one is somewhat different in that it takes place all on Earth for once and starts out seemingly fairly normally. We have Jane Studdick and what's his name? Studdick. Let's see. Mark Studdick, that's right. So we start with this fairly young couple. They have been married maybe a couple of years now. She is still trying to learn how to be a wife and is still interested in finishing her dissertation on John Donne. He is moving forward with his own academic career at Brockton College. But he gets a job offer from NICE, National Institute of something or other, which he thinks will be a good opportunity for him. And he's, in some ways, he's not wrong. In some ways, he is wrong. And he gets wound up in those type of things. Meanwhile, Jane has some friends, and on her side, she ends up getting involved at St. Anne's, where her friends are, with our old friend Ransom from the first two trilogies. And by the end, the planetary powers do get involved for reasons. It's all Weston's and Divine's fault, but it's very different in some ways from the first two books, but I quite enjoyed it personally. Let's see, next I asked Both Things Are True by Kate Holbrook. Sadly, Kate Holbrook passed away last year. She was a historian in the church history library for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, I think, focusing on women's history. She worked on a number of projects related to that. And she wanted to get out several things before she passed away. This is what she managed. It's mostly, includes an interview with her, essays by her. The last one is based on a devotional that she did, probably at BYU. And so, but Both Things Are True. That is the premise. That in religion, there are a lot of paradoxes. And so she talks about that. For example, When it comes to the church, both things are true. The church is true because it contains eternal truths and saving priests of power and ordinances, and because it teaches members to seek and embrace all true. But the church is always becoming true as it grows up and adapts to new circumstances and challenges. Or this one on forgiving and remembering. Let's see if I can find it. Both things are true here. We believe forgiveness, which Jesus makes possible, is the only way for us to heal and make progress as individuals in communities large and small. At the same time, we can't simply cover up and forget about serious wrongdoing. We don't want to excuse behavior that is manipulative, abusive, or even just unloving because we don't want to facilitate that behavior. So I found this a very interesting book to read. I'm very glad that I read it. I also read Abigail Adams, Witness to a Revolution by Natalie S. Bober. Tried reading another biography of Abigail Adams, which was more detailed. It was longer. It was written for adults. This is probably written more for teens. But the other was just written in a way that felt modern and condescending to me. And don't say that was the intention, that's just the way it came off to me. So I read this instead, greatly appreciated it, greatly enjoyed it. Abigail Adams is a fascinating figure in the founding, married to John Adams, who was involved in everything, and even when they were separated for years, or hardly saw each other for years while he was at the Continental Congress or later in Europe. Abigail Adams. She knew everyone. Everyone knew her. Everyone appreciated how intelligent and astute she was. And so everyone was quite happy to correspond with her and tell her the latest news from Europe or from the Continental Congress or etc. and so forth. In fact, they pretty much called her Madam President during President John Adams's presidency because they knew he talked over everything and discussed everything with her. And so she knew everything. There was no point keeping anything from her because what he knew, she knew. Wonderful relationship there. So glad I read it. I also finally finished again Mansfield Park. Some people don't love this one. I do. This is the Cinderella story of Jane Austen, and I absolutely love it. And I absolutely love Fanny. She's such a wonderful heroine. She is strong in a different way, both in standing up for her principles and what she thinks is right, and she's also strong in dealing in such a kind and gentle way with the treatment she gets from most of her family that she's staying with. For those who don't know, this Mansfield Park is the story of Fanny, who when she is 10 years old, I believe, is sent to live with her aunt and uncle because her family is poor, And Sir Thomas and Lady Bertram are rich, and so they agree to provide for her and educate her and have one thing less for her original family to worry about. Except most of them are not very kind to her. Some of them, it's not truly intentional. Some of them, looking at you, Aunt Norris, it really is intentional. And then 8, 9 years, her cousins, Mariah and Julia, are starting to look for husbands, and the Crawfords move into the neighborhood, and her cousin Edmund is the only one who's ever really treated her like a human being. He's working on getting ordained as a minister in the Church of England, and Sir Thomas and Tom Bertram, the eldest, are away for a while, and then Tom is sent back early before Sir Thomas arrives back, and things go on from there. So glad I reread it. Always a pleasure. I also read The Mind of the Maker by Dorothy L. Sayers. This is her views both on creativity, specifically through writing, although it could be applied to others of the arts, through a theological lens, which I found very interesting. Not sure how much I agree with her on every single point, especially the theological side, but it is really interesting to think about where does creativity really come from in the beginning? And I don't think she's wrong that she says that we are creative because we were created by a creative being, namely God. That part I can definitely see. So glad I read it. I also finished, finally, Notes from the Underground by Fyodor Dostoyevsky. Probably not saying that quite correct, so apologies for that. This, need to think about it some more. I'm not sure that I like it because our narrator, whose thoughts we are in pretty much the whole time, he's not a very likable guy, nor do I like his worldview. But that's not to say he doesn't have a few points about things. So like I said, this is one that's going to need some more thought. Yeah. Description of Russian society, roughly about the time it was written. And it's not the prettiest picture. And it's not because it's Russian. You could easily transplant this to anywhere else, change a few specific details, and you would have gotten basically the same thing. I also read The Wood Beyond the World by William Morris. This is my second William Morris. My first was The House of the Wolfings. That was a historical novel. And so found it interesting. Can't say that it was my favorite at the time. So I'm intrigued enough to want to go back to it. But this is pure fairy tale and worked a lot better for me. Uh, we start with a son. Uh, his marriage is in ruins. He's unhappy, so he goes off basically to seek his fortune. Learns bad news from home, never makes it back home. Instead, he enters an enchanted realm, and things go on from there. Quite enjoyed it. I can see why Tolkien and Lewis enjoyed him so much. Well, I only read the first part, but I did read the first part, David Cecil's early Victorian novelists, in which he talks about early Victorian novelists generally. Not that they were perfect, which he admittedly, or which he fully acknowledges, but what they did well, they did really well. So glad I read at least the first part here. It looks like the second chapter is on Charles Dickens. Something to look forward to for next year. And I also managed to finish the Elizabethan World picture by E.M.W. Tillyard. And yes, the Elizabethans definitely had a very different worldview from us, where everything was connected, where hierarchies were important, but not for perhaps the reasons you think, where they were extremely interested in order. And so I'm glad I read it. I'm hopeful that this will help me to understand and appreciate things like Shakespeare next time I get to him. Anyway, that is how I ended my November. Good reading month, I would say. Got through a number of things, so I am well pleased. And I got through, let's see, 2, 3 nonfiction in the second half of the month. And let's see, 4, 5, looks like I got through 5 nonfictions. Oh, I forgot to say last time, that's right. I managed to finish Recollections of a Tour Made in Scotland by Dorothy Wordsworth. Dorothy, her famous brother William, and his great friend Coleridge, they went on a tour of Scotland in the late 1700s, I want to say. Possibly very early 1800s. In any case, they went on a tour of Scotland, which during the Napoleonic Wars, when Europe was not available, was kind of the thing to do in England. But they actually spent 6 weeks in Scotland, and Dorothy gives us a fairly detailed and beautifully written description of the trip and some of the things they saw. Anyway, hope your November reading has been as wonderful as mine has been. Thank you so much for stopping by. Truly do appreciate it. You want to talk about how your November reading went, I'd love to hear about it down in the comments. And until next time, I hope we all stay safe and healthy. And as always, happy reading.